It happened on a Tuesday, one of those ordinary gray-skied mornings in late October where everything in Manhattan felt slightly damp and rushed. The streets glistened from an overnight drizzle, steam curling from sidewalk grates, and impatient cab horns cut through the mist like sharp knives. Reese Maddox adjusted the cuffs of his charcoal suit as he carried his 5-year-old son through the rotating glass doors of Bright Path Academy. No one would guess Reese Maddox, the Reese Maddox, CEO of Maddox International, a man whose name pulsed through boardrooms like an electric current, was also a man who forgot to put the milk back in the fridge or occasionally stepped on Legos barefoot. Leo, perched on his father's hip, was half asleep, his curls flattened against Reese's shoulder. He wore his little navy pea coat with oversized buttons and a bright red scarf his preschool teacher had helped him knit. The chaos of the lobby swallowed them. Kids scampered past in clumsy rain boots. Parents exchanged clipped greetings. Teachers buzzed with the energy only caffeine and early childhood education could explain. Reese was running late, he always was on Tuesdays. He kissed Leo's head, handed him over to Ms. Carla, and barely glanced at the row of tiny coats hanging on the low cubbies. He just reached for the navy one and slung it over his arm as he turned to leave. It wasn't until 6 hours later, after 2 conference calls, a working lunch with tech investors, and a particularly brutal shareholders meeting, that Reese noticed. He was holding the wrong coat. It was Leo's. This one was the same navy color, the same style, but smaller. The buttons were scratched with age. Inside the collar was a name, handwritten in blocky black marker. Junie. Reese stared at it like it might rearrange itself into a solution. He cursed under his breath, ran a hand through his hair, and called the school. They were sympathetic, but no help. Junie's mother already picked her up. "No, I'm afraid we can't give out parent contact information. Perhaps you could return the coat at drop-off tomorrow." That night, Leo refused to eat his chicken nuggets and melted down when Reese tried to put him in the bath. The tiny hiccuping sobs tore at Reese's edges in ways even billion-dollar losses never had. Eventually, Leo fell asleep beside him on the couch, still wearing the red scarf and Reese's wristwatch wrapped around his small wrist like a comfort charm. Reese stared at the coat again. Junie. It was ridiculous how that name lingered in his mind. How, against all logic, it weighed heavier than his upcoming merger presentation or the investor dinner tomorrow night. He didn't know who Junie was or her mother, but something about the mistake gnawed at him. Maybe it was because mistakes weren't supposed to happen in his world. Or maybe, deep down, he was just tired of always being 5 steps ahead and never in the present. The next morning, Reese arrived early. He dressed Leo slowly, attentively, the right coat, the right scarf, he made sure of it. They walked hand in hand through the light drizzle to the school. Reese scanned the lobby for a mother who looked as disoriented or annoyed as he'd felt the night before. He spotted her near the back, standing still while the world buzzed around her. She was crouched next to a small girl with 2 wild braids and glitter on her knees. Her coatless daughter wore mismatched socks and held a crayon drawing of a purple house and what looked like a giant dog. Reese approached slowly, the small coat folded neatly over his arm. "You must be Junie," he said to the girl. Junie blinked up at him, then nodded solemnly. "And you must be her mother." The woman looked up. She had the kind of face that caught him off guard, quietly beautiful, thoughtful, not movie star polished but real. She wore a green wool coat, her hair escaping from a loose bun, her expression one of practiced calm with an undercurrent of fatigue. "I think I have something that belongs to you," he said, offering the coat. Her brow furrowed, and then she laughed. It was soft and genuine, and it reached her eyes in a way that made something tight in Reese's chest loosen. "Oh, I was wondering how that happened. I thought maybe I'd just lost it. Again." "I grabbed it by mistake yesterday," he said. "My son's coat is practically identical. I didn't notice until late." "No harm done." She took the coat from him, brushing his fingers briefly. "Thank you for bringing it back." Reese hesitated. "I'm Reese, and that's Leo." "Maeve," she said, "and this is Junie, as you already figured out." Junie gave a toothy smile and offered Leo a crumpled sticker. Something shifted then, not something grand or cinematic but subtle, a small ripple. I think our kids are in the same class, Maeve said. They've probably shared paintbrushes and germs and sandbox secrets without us ever knowing. He nodded, that sounds about right. And then Leo reached up and took Junie's hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. Reese looked down, you two know each other. They're pretty inseparable, Maeve said, at least according to Ms. Carla. There was a beat. A long enough silence for Reese to register how little he actually knew about his son's daily world, about who he laughed with, about whose drawings hung beside his in the classroom. Maeve stood slinging Junie's tiny coat over her arm. Well, thanks again for the delivery. Reese hesitated. Would you maybe like a coffee? I mean as a thank you. I know it was my mistake, but... She raised an eyebrow. You're thanking me for letting you fix the thing you messed up. He laughed, caught fair. I can't this morning, work, she said, glancing at her phone, but maybe another time. Yeah, sure, another time. She turned, Junie skipping behind her. Reese watched them go, a strange warmth blooming beneath his ribs. It was nothing, just a small moment, a morning misstep. But something about it stayed with him all day. The rain had stopped by afternoon, but the city still wore its dampness like a second skin. Inside the corner office of Maddox International, Reese stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, his phone pressed loosely to his ear, his thoughts drifting. He should have been focused on the Q4 forecast or the tension brewing with the Tokyo office, but instead, he was wondering what Maeve did for work. She hadn't said. Her phone case was cracked, her bag had marker stains on the leather, and she had that weary but determined look he recognized in his own reflection some mornings. Single parent, likely. Independent, definitely. He hadn't expected to think about her again after returning the coat. But here he was, standing in front of glass towers while the city blinked beneath him, recalling the way she'd said his name without any weight or expectation behind it. Just a name, just a moment. His assistant's voice came through the intercom. Mr. Maddox, Leo's preschool just called. There's been a situation. Reese's heart jolted, a cold instinct crashing through the fog. What kind of situation? He had a fall during recess. Nothing serious, but they said he asked specifically for you. He was out the door in under 3 minutes. When he arrived, the nurse was kind and unhurried, but Reese could barely register her calm tone. His gaze zeroed in on Leo's scraped elbow, the tight line of his mouth, the unshed tears clinging stubbornly to his lashes. Hey, buddy, Reese said, kneeling beside him. Heard you had a rough day. Leo blinked at him, brave and quiet. I tripped on the slide ladder. Junie helped me. Reese looked up. Maeve was already there, perched on the low bench beside her daughter, their backpacks at her feet. I was here for pickup anyway, she said, standing. Your assistant called, said you were on your way. Thank you, Reese said, and then lower, really. Junie tugged on Leo's hand. You okay now? Leo nodded solemnly. The school was emptying around them, the usual hum of dismissal fading. Reese cleared his throat. Do you live nearby? I could give you both a ride. Maeve hesitated. We walk, it's not far. You sure? I'm sure, she said, her eyes softening slightly. But we could use a stop at the corner cafe, if you're not rushing back to save the world or anything. He almost smiled. I think the world can wait 30 minutes. The cafe was cramped and smelled like cinnamon and burnt espresso. Maeve ordered a tea and a cookie for Junie. Reese got Leo hot chocolate and a coffee for himself. They took a corner table, steam curling from their cups, the window fogged slightly from the temperature change. Junie was coloring on a napkin with a pen Reese had handed her. Leo watched her, comforted just by her nearness. So, Maeve said, hands wrapped around her tea. What's your actual job, Reese Maddox? He looked up from his coffee. You don't already know, he asked. Maeve smirked. I know you own very expensive shoes and carry stress like a second briefcase. But no, I don't know what you do. I try not to Google the parents at my kid's school. CEO, he said simply, of a firm I inherited, finance, tech, mergers, that whole world. She nodded. Sounds exhausting. It is, he took a sip. What about you? I'm a freelance illustrator, children's books mostly, work from home and from wherever I can plug in my tablet. That's unexpected. Let me guess, you assumed I was a teacher or a nurse. No, he said, setting his cup down. I didn't assume, but it's hard to picture you having time to be creative. You seem like someone who carries a lot. Maeve tilted her head, her expression unreadable. We all do, don't we? He glanced at the kids, then back at her. My wife left when Leo was 3, he said quietly. She wanted something else, someone else. I got custody. She sends postcards from wherever she's working. Maeve didn't flinch. She nodded once slowly. I was never married, she said. Junie's dad got overwhelmed before she was born. He left and I stayed. They sat in that silence for a moment, one that didn't demand to be filled. The kids were whispering now, huddled over the napkin artwork. I didn't think I'd meet anyone else through Leo's school, Reese said. Maeve lifted a brow. You haven't. We're just two tired people sharing overpriced caffeine and trading war stories. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. I'm serious, she added more gently now. This isn't that kind of moment. What kind of moment is it? She looked at him then, not through him or around him, but at him. A pause. They left the cafe just after 5. The sky was streaked with gray and amber. The air had turned cooler, and Leo slipped his hand into Reese's coat pocket. Maeve pulled Junie's hood up and glanced at Reese. Thanks for the cocoa, she said. He nodded, thanks for making space. They turned in opposite directions at the next corner, their children trailing behind them, glancing back at one another. Reese didn't look over his shoulder, but he knew Maeve didn't either. Still, the space between them felt a little less wide. A week passed, the kind of week that filled up quickly without asking permission, meetings bleeding into evenings, Leo catching a cold that left Reese wiping down every surface in their apartment with a kind of desperation usually reserved for mergers, and Maeve retreating into the quiet edges of his thoughts when he wasn't paying attention. Reese told himself the moment had passed. That strange intersection of lives, the coat, the scraped elbow, the cafe, was a blip, meaningful but not something to anchor his thoughts around. And yet he found himself lingering at drop-off just long enough to scan the doorway, checking if Junie had finally replaced the old coat with a newer one, or if Maeve would offer another brief, dry smile that said she saw more than she let on. One morning, as he was zipping up Leo's jacket, Ms. Carla crouched beside them. We're having a parent workshare day on Friday, she said, cheerful in that warm, practiced way teachers had. Just a little show and tell of what the grown-ups do in the real world. Leo says you talk to numbers that wear suits. Reese blinked. What? You'd be great, she said. Just 15 minutes, nothing formal. Reese opened his mouth to decline, to explain that he had back-to-back investor meetings and a quarterly review. Leo looked up at him with wide eyes. You'll come. And just like that, his schedule rearranged itself. Friday morning, the classroom buzzed with the kind of chaos only sugar and anticipation could spark. Parents carried briefcases, tool kits, and sample books. One dad in a mechanic's uniform wheeled in a tire. A mom unzipped a violin case. Reese stood stiffly near the back, his laptop tucked under one arm, wearing a blazer that still smelled faintly of yesterday's espresso. Then Maeve walked in. She wore a soft blue sweater and black jeans, a sketchpad under one arm, Junie tugging her along with the quiet authority only a 5-year-old possessed. She caught Reese's eye and gave a small nod. When her turn came, Maeve sat cross-legged on the rug, letting the kids crowd around her as she opened her sketchpad. I make pictures for books, she said simply, like this one. She held up a page, a watercolor of a bear in yellow rain boots, standing in a puddle looking up at the moon. Sometimes I draw what the writer describes, she continued. Sometimes I imagine what a moment feels like and try to put it into color. The kids were mesmerized. Even Leo leaned forward. When Reese's name was called, he stood slowly, clearing his throat. I help run a company, he said. We help other companies figure out what to do with their money so they can build things, hire people, or create new ideas. Blank stares. He knelt beside his laptop and pulled up a simple slide he'd made the night before, a cartoon version of Leo with a briefcase. This is Leo running a lemonade stand. He needs money to buy lemons, so he asks me, his investor, for help. Some giggles, one kid shouted, "But what if he just steals the lemons?" Reese smiled, "Then we're in trouble." The teacher clapped, the kids clapped louder, and Leo beamed like his dad had just landed on the moon. Afterward, as the crowd thinned and the room emptied, Maeve approached him at the classroom door. "You surprised me," she said. "Because I didn't put the kids to sleep with quarterly numbers." "No, because you smiled, for real, I think." He glanced at her. It's easier when Leo's around, he keeps things honest. There was a pause, then she asked, "Do you want to get a drink tonight?" Reese hesitated, "With the kids or—" "Without," she said, "if you're up for it." He was. The bar Maeve chose was tucked between a bookstore and a florist's shop on the Upper West Side. Warm wood, soft lighting, the kind of music you didn't recognize but felt like you'd always known. They sat at the corner table, each with a drink and the soft hum of the city just outside the window. "I haven't done this in a while," Reese admitted. "Sat still. Been on a date." Maeve blinked. "This is a date." He coughed. I thought it was, is it not?" She laughed into her wine. "Relax, I'm just messing with you." Reese exhaled, the tension draining from his shoulders. Maeve leaned in slightly. "You know, I never would have guessed you were the kind of dad who reads bedtime stories in voices, but Junie told me Leo said you're very serious until it's time to be silly." He sipped his drink. "She's not wrong." There was a beat of quiet, not awkward, just the kind that made room for reflection. "What would you be doing if you weren't running Maddox International?" she asked. He blinked. "What makes you think I'd be doing something else?" "You hesitate before answering questions that aren't on a spreadsheet." He studied her. "I liked architecture once, before the company needed me." "Do you ever miss it?" "Not as much as I thought I would, but sometimes, yeah." Maeve traced a fingertip along the rim of her glass. "I miss painting, real painting. Oils, mess, big canvases. These days it's all digital, client requests. I squeeze in what I can between deadlines and bedtime battles." Reese's voice softened. "It gets lonely sometimes, doesn't it?" Maeve nodded, her gaze dropping, "Even when you're never really alone." They sat with that truth for a while. Later, as they stood outside under the street lamp glow, Reese hesitated. "I'm not very good at this," he said, "letting people in, my life too structured." Maeve tilted her head. "What makes you think I'm trying to get in?" He smiled, unsure if she was teasing. "I'm just saying," she added, gentler now, "I don't expect anything. But I also don't think it's an accident we ended up in the same lobby with two nearly identical coats and two kids who already saw what we hadn't yet." He exhaled. "You think that's fate?" "No," she said, starting to turn away. "I think that's life, messy and surprising and rarely convenient." She walked off without waiting for a reply. And for the first time in years, Reese let someone leave without trying to control the outcome. The holidays crept in quietly that year, carried on the backs of colder mornings and the sharp smell of pine in the air. Window displays blinked to life with garlands and snowflakes, and sidewalk vendors swapped sunflowers for wreaths. At Bright Path Academy, the children sang lopsided carols and tracked glitter through the hallways like breadcrumbs. Leo had taken to humming constantly. Reese found himself listening, even when he didn't mean to, over breakfast during bath time as he read emails. There was something about the boy's contentment that echoed, a reminder of how much his world had changed, how much quieter it had become in a good way. Maeve hadn't brought up their evening at the bar. She didn't text afterward, didn't linger at drop-off, didn't follow it up with anything resembling an invitation. And yet there was no frost in her silence, just space. Room to step into if he chose. He hadn't called, not because he didn't want to, but because for the first time in a long while, he didn't want to rush whatever this was into becoming something before it was ready. Still, when Ms. Carla posted the sign-up sheet for the school's winter gathering, his name appeared beside Cookie Station Volunteer before he had time to second-guess it. Maeve's name was there too, under Storytime Reader. That Friday, Reese took the afternoon off. He arrived just after noon, sleeves rolled up, buttoned shirt untucked at the waist, flour on his hands before the first batch of sugar cookies had cooled. He worked beside a mom named Priya, who insisted on playing a Mariah Carey playlist on low volume and told him he had serious spreadsheet energy. At some point he caught Maeve across the room, seated in a reading nook, a group of children draped over cushions around her. Her voice was low and warm, the kind of tone that softened even the adults who passed nearby pretending not to eavesdrop. Reese watched as Junie curled under her mother's arm, utterly still, completely absorbed. Leo joined her partway through the second story. He didn't say anything. He just sat beside Junie, shoulder to shoulder, the two of them breathing in time like they'd always belonged beside one another. Reese felt it then, deeper than before, that this wasn't just coincidence. Not just overlapping drop-offs and scraped knees and shared crayons. This was the beginning of something. By the time cleanup began, the kids were dizzy with sugar and noise. Reese found Maeve near the back, stacking chairs. "You read well," he said. She didn't look up. "I've had practice. Junie likes to pick the longest books right before bedtime. She knows it buys her an extra 20 minutes. He smiled. "Leo does that too." Maeve looked at him, her face unreadable. "Why didn't you call?" He blinked. "I thought maybe I should let it breathe." "And what made you change your mind?" "I didn't," he said quietly. I didn't want to keep watching you across rooms and pretending I was." She leaned against a table, arms folded. "So what now?" Reese shrugged. "Maybe we start small, like the cookies." She laughed just once. "You're not a small guy, Reese. You walk into a room like you're about to buy it." "Then maybe I'm learning." Maeve studied him. "You really want this?" "I don't know what this is," he said, "but I want the chance to find out." A beat passed, then she nodded toward the hallway. "Come with me." She led him to a side door, out onto the back courtyard where a few kids played beneath string lights and a teacher handed out paper cups of cider. The noise of the party dulled behind the closed door. Maeve stopped beside a picnic table, her breath visible in the chill. "I like you," she said, "but I need you to understand something." "I'm listening." "I'm not looking to be saved or fixed or swept up in someone's reinvention. I don't think you need any of those things." "I come with complications," she said, "and I don't mean Junie. I mean the long nights, the deadlines, the weeks I barely hold it together." Reese stepped closer. "So do I. And I don't know how to fit someone else into this life. It's tight, there's not a lot of room." "Then don't fit me in," he said. "Let's build something new, something with room for all of it." Maeve looked at him then, and he saw the way her shoulders softened. Not completely, but enough. From the window he caught sight of Leo and Junie, now wearing paper crowns and waving tiny fake candles like miniature kings and queens. They were laughing, faces flushed from running. "I think they're already ahead of us," Reese said. Maeve glanced, her smile faint. "Yeah, I think they are." They stood there, watching the glow through the glass, neither of them rushing toward or away from anything. And in the stillness, Reese felt it again. Not fate, not luck. Just something rare and real, unfolding at its own pace. Winter deepened its grip on the city. Snow came slow at first, quiet flurries like drifting thoughts, then thickened into blankets that clung to sidewalks and softened even the most unforgiving corners of Manhattan. It was a kind of hush Reese hadn't known he missed until he stood still long enough to feel it. By mid-December his life had shifted, not dramatically. No sweeping gestures, no sudden resignations or romantic declarations, just subtle, steady change. Dinners weren't always quiet anymore. Leo's stories stretched longer, especially when Junie and Maeve joined them, which they did more often now. Once, it was just a mistake with two tiny coats. Now it was Junie's purple gloves tucked in their hallway basket, Maeve's laughter floating from the kitchen as she tried to guess what Leo had hidden in the mystery Tupperware he insisted on packing for school lunches. Reese kept thinking it would feel like losing control. It didn't. It felt like breathing. The night before the school's winter showcase, Reese and Leo stood in the grocery store aisle staring down an entire row of miniature candy canes. Junie says her mom's allergic to artificial strawberry, Leo said solemnly. Reese glanced at his son. Good to know. She says regular peppermint is best, but the twisty kind, not the flat ones. Reese looked again, found the right ones, and tossed them into the cart. Remind me to keep you around for future negotiations. Leo smiled like it was a secret between them. The next evening, Bright Path's multi-purpose room was packed. Kids in handmade elf hats ran in excited circles while teachers tried, gently but firmly, to herd them toward the makeshift stage. Parents balanced phones in one hand and coats in the other, angling for the best seat. Reese spotted Maeve in the crowd before she saw him. She was adjusting Junie's paper snowflake crown, crouched low, her coat sliding off one shoulder. Her expression, soft and focused, was one he'd come to recognize. She gave all her attention to the moment in front of her, no matter how chaotic or small. When she finally looked up, her eyes found his in that effortless way they did now. They didn't kiss, they didn't even hug. Just a shared look, a thread stretched between them that said everything. After the show, after Leo's reindeer solo and Junie's accidental knockover of the snowman prop that made the whole room laugh, Reese invited them back to his apartment for Coco. He didn't ask out of politeness, and Maeve didn't say yes out of obligation. They simply wanted to be in the same place a little longer. The apartment was warm, the windows fogged slightly from the heat. Leo and Junie built towers out of couch pillows. Maeve stood near the counter, watching Reese pour 2 mugs of cocoa. You know, she said, I used to think I needed to keep everything in separate compartments. Work, Junie, what little time I had left for myself, nothing mixed, safer that way. He passed her a mug, I get that. But I don't feel that way around you. It's like, she paused, brow furrowing, like the lines blur but somehow it's easier, not harder. Reese leaned beside her, the corner of his arm brushing hers. That's how I know it matters, because I'm not trying to keep you on the edge of my life anymore. She didn't say anything for a moment, just sipped her drink, watching the kids collapse in a heap of laughter on the floor. I've never brought someone into Junie's world before, she said. Not like this. Reese turned to her. I'm not going anywhere, Maeve, not unless you ask me to. She looked at him then, really looked, and whatever doubt had lived behind her eyes the first day they met seemed to finally quiet. I'm not going to, she said. They stood there side by side, the simple weight of shared presence filling the room. Later, when the kids had fallen asleep on the couch mid-cartoon, Maeve curled her feet beneath her and rested her head lightly on Reese's shoulder. No declarations, no fireworks, just warmth. A quiet certainty. And somewhere in the background, 2 nearly identical coats hung side by side in the hallway. Not lost. Not mismatched. Just waiting together for whatever came next.